Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to UL100ZB, Information Literacy and Technology, and I hope that you've had a great and somewhat relaxing spring break. We are now getting set for the next pillar of our information literacy module, and this one is titled Visual Literacy. So let's do a quick recap of our ethical use of information assignment. I asked you in a 3-page response to consider the scenario of being in the learning commons of the library at 3 a.m. one morning and recognizing a classmate from another course that you both currently are taking. And the classmate goes to the scanner in the learning commons and appears to be scanning pages from a book. And this is your textbook from your class, and it's a textbook for which you paid the grand total of $150. So I ask you to think about your thoughts about this issue, that it looked like the student maybe was scanning the entire textbook, saving the file on the flash drive, and what you might do, considering copyright laws and also considering the Emporia State University Information Technology Use Policy. Now, I will tell you that when it comes to the ethical use of information, and particularly with this scenario, there really are no right or wrong answers because a lot of it has to do with fair use, but also the fact that somebody is scanning something for free that another company or a publisher is actually selling for a profit and one for which you paid $150. So there were a lot of questions to consider in this scenario, and just as many questions when it comes to the ethical use of information. So now we skipped around in our textbook, and we're now on Chapter 8, and we're going to be dealing with a concept that's known as visual literacy. Visual literacy is a supplement to the 7 pillars of information literacy. This is the ability to identify, gather, evaluate, manage, use, create, and share visual material in an effective, ethical, and self-aware manner. Now, the trail to information literacy and beyond that you're going to be working on for this class is actually a good example of visual literacy. And what I've done here is giving you a link, and I'm also going to put this in our Canvas course. This is an example of a trail to information literacy that a student in my class last semester created. And this is really what one trail of information literacy would look like on a site that's called Weebly.com that we'll be going over in the next few weeks. This student did child maltreatment and abuse, and you see that she put in something visual. She actually put in a picture to kind of break up what she was doing a little bit more. This is her topic description and overview. And these were the annotated lists of sources that she used and the list of sources not used. But look at the visual. It looks like what she did was use a background that might be a little bit more childlike in scope, which would be very appropriate for what she was talking about in terms of child maltreatment and abuse. The reason I wanted to show you that is that we have some issues that we're going to be considering for this pillar: photos, advertisements, and news. We're going to look first to see how photos can affect the way that we process and interpret information. We're also going to be looking at the way in which advertisements sway our viewpoints, and then also how we gather our news nowadays and how the interpretation of various media might affect the interpretation of news stories and what we see. That's also known as propaganda. We'll be looking at that later on. So we're going to start first of all with photographs. This is probably going to look kind of familiar. A lot of you may have seen this one going around the internet, and it certainly kept popping up on a lot of my Facebook feeds. What color is this dress? That's going to look pretty familiar. This actually popped up on a Tumblr site. And we have, guys, please help me. Is this dress white or gold or blue and black? And I'd be curious to know if any of you have seen this as well, because this got really popular just a little while back. Now, in my view, the dress is looking blue and black, but I know when it popped up on my Facebook feed, it also looked white and gold. Well, part of that has to do with our perception and the way that we see things, but also how lighting can affect different visual cues as well. And in this article from the New York Times, we see that our perception of color depends on interpreting the amount of light in a room or a scene. And it says when cues about the ambient light are missing, people might perceive the same color in different ways. And you see that depending upon whether the dress was in shadow or the dress itself or the dress in bright light, it really does affect the way that it looks. So there's the white and gold, and then there's more of the blue and black. And it turned out with this particular dress, other photographs did show that the dress is actually blue and black. And it says in the second photograph, you can see this is against a white wedding dress and against other visual cues. But this is a great example of how a photograph just of the same dress can really be affected by lighting, by adjustments. Very interesting things going on. Photos in Photoshop also can be really, really interesting to take a look at. This particular link from Jezebel.com pulls up something that was actually a big deal a few years ago. This is a cover of Redbook magazine, a women's magazine, and this is Faith Hill on the cover, and she's looking pretty good on the cover. However, what was discovered as we go down here, and you can really see this going back and forth, look how heavily Faith Hill's photograph had been adjusted and retouched. So there's a lot of other stuff going on, and you can see some differences between the original photograph and as it keeps switching back and forth from Redbook. So this is another really good example of how our perceptions, and sometimes our perceptions of beauty as much as anything else, really can be affected by our media and what we see. I have another one that I'm going to show you here. And this is a YouTube video on the standard of beauty and Photoshop. This is a model before and after. So let's take a look. It's pretty striking, isn't it? And to me, that video is a very powerful representation of how Photoshop can really affect the way that we might perceive ourselves in terms of beauty or in handsomeness. So part of visual literacy is knowing that what you see may not always be the truth in photos or in media or television, advertisements, or anything else. And speaking of advertisements, I have another video I want to show you, and then also just a visual here. Let's look at the visual first. This was an advertisement that I found online for a weight loss pill called Hydroxycut. And I've seen this advertised on TV as well. And I always love these pictures because look at the before and after. I am not actually entirely sure that's even the same person or not. And even if it is, we don't really know for sure what actually has been photoshopped, what's been changed. All we see is a dramatic before and after, all due to Hydroxycut. So advertisements can be very, very powerful in the way that they portray what we want to see and what other people want us to see as well. This is all part of visual literacy. And in terms of other advertisements, we're going to take a look now at a political advertisement. This is Becky's Story, and this was released about the same time that Sam Brownback was running for governor of the state of Kansas. So let's take a look.
Kansas is finally growing again with more jobs than ever, but families need to keep more of their money.
I blame taxes for taking too much of what we earn. So this November, I'll be voting for Sam Brownback, and I want to tell you why. When I heard that Paul Davis had voted in the State House to raise taxes by over $1 billion, I said that's enough. Because Sam Brownback has cut taxes, that's why I want Sam as governor.
Kansas is finally growing again with more jobs than ever, but families need to keep more of their money.
I blame taxes for.
Okay, I wanted to stop this right here because you see several things going on with this advertisement that was pushing Sam Brownback for governor. Notice that the woman is rather plain. In other words, looking like just plain folks, looking like an ordinary tax-paying American citizen. We see that probably she has a husband in the background. We don't really see his face. We have photographs like family photographs, kind of nice lighting over here. So if you look at that, that just sort of sets the tone of an ordinary concerned Kansan worried about taxes, worrying about spending. We saw the concern about the other candidate, the Democratic candidate, Paul Davis, and what he voted for on taxes and raising taxes in the Kansas legislature. This is a really good example that we're going to be looking at in our second module, and what I'm going to have you do for a visual literacy assignment on looking at cues in media that can help sway us to think one way or another way. And again, this is all part of learning about visual literacy and being aware of how our stories, what we have been told to think, how this can be affected. Once you're aware of that, that can really make you much more literate and very aware of visual cues. Stay tuned for part 2.